Today, we're diving deep into the Vizhinjam International Deepwater Multipurpose Seaport, a transformative project for India's maritime trade. This is a sprawling story of ambition, challenges, and a vision that took decades to realize. We're covering every single detail: the construction journey, strategic and economic significance, environmental controversies, legal battles, political drama, the role of Adani ports in the public-private partnership, and how Vizhinjam compares to global transshipment hubs. The story of Vizhinjam's construction timeline begins in 1991, when the idea for a deep-sea port near Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala was first proposed. Kerala's Ports Minister M. V. Raghavan, under Chief Minister K. Karunagaran, laid the initial groundwork. Subsequent state governments, led by E. K. Nayanar and A. K. Antony, pursued the project, but early tenders hit roadblocks due to security clearance issues and a lack of investors. An MOU signed in the 1990s with a private firm fell apart when the central government denied security clearance to the chosen consortium, stalling progress. Between 2006 and 2013, renewed efforts came under Chief Ministers V.S. Achyutanandan and Oomen Chandy. Early bids were marred by legal disputes, such as when Lanco Group's bid was challenged over a Chinese partner, leading to its withdrawal. Learning from these setbacks, the project was restructured into a landlord port model with public funding support, as advised by the International Finance Corporation. Environmental impact assessments conducted by L&T Infrastructure were completed, and an expert panel from the Ministry of Environment recommended clearance in December 2013. A major breakthrough arrived in 2015 when the Kerala government, under Chief Minister Oomen Chandy, signed a concession agreement in August with Adani Ports and SEZ Limited, who emerged as the sole bidder. The project adopted a public-private partnership on a design, build, finance, operate, transfer basis, with Adani Vizhinjam Port Limited securing a 40-year concession, extendable by 20 years, to develop and operate the port. The central government approved viability gap funding to ensure financial viability, and construction formally began on December 5, 2015. However, the road was far from smooth. From 2015 to 2020, construction faced significant hurdles. Cyclone Oki in 2017 severely damaged the partly built breakwater. A shortage of critical materials, like limestone for the breakwater, caused further delays. Local fishing communities began protesting, alleging the port's construction was causing coastal erosion and impacting their livelihoods. These agitations, combined with the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, led Adani to invoke force majeure clauses, pushing back completion timelines. The initially targeted opening in 2018 was missed. By 2023, progress resumed. In October, a heavy lift vessel, Genhua 15, arrived carrying giant key cranes, marking the port's first ship arrival. On July 11, 2024, Vizhinjam welcomed its first large container mothership, San Fernando, symbolizing the start of trial operations. Between July and October 2024, over 272 large vessels called at the port, handling more than 5.5 lakh or 550,000 TEUs during the trial phase. Full commercial operations kicked off on December 3, 2024. As of May 2025, Prime Minister Narendra Modi officially inaugurated the Vizhinjam International Seaport on May 2, 2025, marking it fully operational. The port is already handling over 100,000 TEUs per month during its ramp-up phase and has successfully berthed some of the world's largest container ships, like MSC Turkiye. With the first phase completed, including a 2.95-kilometer breakwater and 1,800 meters of quay, Vizhinjam is now India's first deepwater transshipment hub in service. Now let's explore why this port matters so much, starting with its strategic and economic importance. Domestically, Vizhinjam is poised to revolutionize India's maritime economy by repatriating transshipment traffic and slashing logistics costs. Currently, an estimated 75% of India's container transshipment, which involves cargo transferred via an intermediate port, is handled at foreign hubs like Colombo, Singapore, and Dubai. This reliance costs India valuable foreign exchange and adds time and expense to shipments. Vizhinjam's operation is expected to bring a large share of that traffic back to Indian shores. The port could cut logistics costs for Indian manufacturers by 30 to 40%, boosting export competitiveness. It provides a domestic gateway for cargo that previously detoured abroad for reloading. Kerala's Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan hailed Vizhinjam as a new era in India's maritime trade, emphasizing the state's heavy investment, covering two-thirds of the Rs 8,867 crore Phase 1 cost. The port integrates with the national supply chain, supporting the Sagarmala Initiative, India's port-led development program, by enhancing port capacity and connectivity. In 2024, the Shipping Ministry designated Vizhinjam as India's first transshipment hub, aligning policies like cabotage relaxation to facilitate mainline vessel calls. Internationally, Vizhinjam's strategic location is a game changer, sitting just 10 nautical miles from the world's busiest east-west shipping route, the Suez Canal to Malacca Strait route. It's the only Indian port adjacent to a major international shipping lane, giving it a prime advantage for attracting large vessels. With a natural depth of 18 to 24 meters, it can berth ultra-large container ships with over 20,000 TEU capacity, something few South Asian ports can handle. This positions Vizhinjam as a pivotal player for India to emerge as a transshipment alternative to regional hubs like Colombo. Industry analyses predict Vizhinjam will challenge Colombo's dominance in the Indian Ocean transshipment market. Every year, millions of tons of Indian cargo transshipped abroad could now be handled domestically, potentially undermining Colombo's role as the primary hub for South Asian ports. Beyond economics, there's a geopolitical angle. By capturing cargo previously sent to foreign ports, Vizhinjam strengthens India's strategic autonomy in maritime trade. It reduces dependence on neighboring countries' infrastructure and counters growing Chinese influence in the region's port sector, where China has invested heavily in ports like Colombo and Hambantota in Sri Lanka. A successful Vizhinjam dilutes this leverage. Located at the doorstep of the Indian Ocean, the port also enhances India's ability to monitor and secure key sea lanes. In summary, Vizhinjam is both a commercial gateway, boosting trade efficiency and revenue, and a strategic asset cementing India's position as a leading maritime power in the region. Economically, the port's operations are expected to generate thousands of jobs and stimulate related industries. Logistics parks, container freight stations, and other ancillary facilities are being planned around the port, spurring regional development. By offering a high-capacity, modern port on India's southern tip, Vizhinjam can serve as a hub for coastal shipping within India, distributing imported cargo to smaller domestic ports and aggregating export cargo. This hub-and-spoke model, typical of transshipment, makes shipping more economical and flexible for the entire subcontinent. Overall, the project is a game-changer, potentially handling 50% of India's transshipment needs once fully developed, a role with economic and strategic ripple effects across South Asia. Next, we need to address the environmental impact and legal challenges, which have been significant. From its inception, Vizhinjam faced intense scrutiny over its environmental and social impacts. Its location on a sensitive coastline meant large-scale construction, like breakwaters, dredging, and land reclamation, could alter coastal processes. Key concerns included coastal erosion, marine ecology disturbance, and impacts on local fishing communities' livelihoods. A comprehensive environmental impact assessment conducted by L&T Infrastructure in the late 2000s evaluated impacts on coastal morphology, fish habitats, and marine life. In January 2014, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change granted environmental and coastal regulation zone clearances for the port's development. These clearances were challenged by environmental activists and fisherfolk who argued the project area included ecologically sensitive coastal stretches like a unique rocky cliff formation and rich marine biodiversity, which should be protected under CRZ regulations. Critics claimed the 2011 CRZ notification relaxed protections, such as omitting areas of outstanding natural beauty from CRZ-I, enabling the clearance. There were fears of habitat loss, particularly the submergence of 15 near-shore reefs used as fishing grounds. In 2016, the National Green Tribunal delivered a key judgment on appeals against the clearances. The NGT refused to quash the environmental and CRZ clearances, allowing the project to proceed, but it imposed strict conditions. It directed the formation of an expert monitoring committee to oversee compliance with environmental safeguards. The tribunal noted that while part of a coastline cliff was removed for construction, measures were in place to prevent erosion, and most of the cliff remained intact. The NGT emphasized balancing development with ecology, ordering regular shoreline monitoring, habitat protection efforts, and periodic reports on coastal changes. It even allowed a later review plea as new erosion data emerged, keeping the door open for revisiting impacts. Local fishing communities were the project's strongest critics. Thousands of traditional fisherfolk in villages along the project site alleged that heavy construction, especially the massive breakwater, accelerated coastal erosion. Beaches used to land fishing boats narrowed or vanished in some areas. Fishermen reported altered fish patterns, forcing them to venture farther out to sea. They argued the port threatened the livelihoods and food security of an estimated 50,000 to 60,000 people dependent on coastal fishing. By 2019 to 2020, reports indicated hundreds of families were displaced by shoreline changes, with the National Fish Workers Forum documenting at least 172 families made homeless by erosion in 2020. About 143 families were shifted to relief camps after high waves inundated their villages. These grievances sparked continuous protests since 2015, peaking in 2022. In August 2022, fisherfolk set up a protest shelter blocking the port gate, demanding a halt to dredging and construction until a proper impact study was done. Backed by the local Catholic Church, which wields influence in the coastal community, the protests lasted months. Tensions escalated in late 2022 with occasional clashes between protesters and police. The Kerala High Court and Supreme Court intervened multiple times, ordering that port construction not be obstructed, but urging dialogue with fishermen's representatives. The state government formed committees to address concerns, offering relief measures, compensation for those who lost homes to erosion, subsidies for days when fishing was impossible due to weather, and promises of rehabilitation for the displaced. By late 2022, the impasse eased after the government agreed to many demands, including an independent study on coastal erosion by experts from the Indian Institute of Technology and other institutions, plus a rehabilitation package. Adani ports consistently denied that the port caused erosion, citing expert studies attributing changes to natural shoreline dynamics and cyclones. Legal battles extended beyond the NGT. In 2014, the Supreme Court refused to stay NGT proceedings, stressing that economic development and environmental issues must go hand in hand. In 2018, when fisherfolk petitioned the Supreme Court to halt construction until a fresh environmental assessment, the court declined to stop the project. Instead, it held that Adani ports and the Kerala government would be responsible for restoring the environment to its original state if later evidence showed damage, a polluter pays principle that allowed construction to continue while signaling developer accountability. In summary, Vizhinjam navigated a minefield of environmental regulations and local opposition. It secured necessary clearances, but under strict conditions. Ongoing monitoring of coastal changes is in place, and the Kerala government is implementing relief and rehabilitation, like new housing for displaced families and financial aid for fisherfolk on non-fishing days. As of 2025, environmental groups remain vigilant, calling for continuous impact assessments, especially with further port expansion, to protect marine ecology, like fish breeding areas and coral reefs. Port authorities have responded with measures like artificial reef deployments and sedimentation studies to manage erosion. The true long-term environmental impact will need close monitoring as Vizhinjam ramps up operations. Moving to the political background and controversy, Vizhinjam's journey spans multiple decades and involves all major political stakeholders in Kerala, often amid heated debates. The concept was introduced in the early 1990s under a Congress-led United Democratic Front government led by C.A. Karunagaran, and was positively picked up by the subsequent CPI-M-led Left Democratic Front government under E.K. Nayanar. This bipartisan interest showed the project's importance, but it languished due to funding and clearance hurdles in New Delhi. When A.K. Antony's Congress government pursued a private tender in the late 1990s, The BJP-led central government denied security clearance to a Chinese-linked consortium, highlighting how national security concerns intertwined with local politics from the start. In the 2000s, V.S. Achyutanandan government made another push, but the Congress-led UPI central government raised similar security concerns, stalling progress. An all-party meeting in Kerala resolved to retender, showing rare political unity. A new bid round in the late 2000s saw Lanco, with a reported Chinese partner, emerge as the winner, but it was challenged in court by a competitor and scrapped. These years saw political controversy, with UDF and LDF accusing each other of mismanagement. The LDF claimed Congress botched tenders, while Congress pointed out LDF's failure to secure central clearances. The Adani partnership in 2015 was a significant bipartisan decision. Chandy's UDF government, with backing from the BJP-led NDA central government via viability gap funding, structured a viable deal. Adani Ports, the sole bidder, was awarded the contract. Interestingly, this decision to involve Adani, a group often seen as close to the BJP, was made by a Congress chief minister. While the opposition left initially voiced concerns about privatization, there was broad recognition that without a private player, the port might never materialize given past failures. The 2015 concession signing was relatively free of political rancor, with both ruling and opposition parties supporting the port as vital for Kerala's development. However, murmurs later arose about the deal's terms, like the revenue share to the state and the large public investment. Critics argued Adani's 40-year operation with delayed revenue sharing was too generous, but the state justified it to attract a builder for this long-delayed project. When the LDF government under Pinarayi Vijayan took over in 2016, they embraced the project despite being in opposition when Adani was chosen. The LDF continued land acquisition and facilitated construction, often coordinating with the BJP-led central government, an unusual left BJP alignment driven by mutual interest in a nationally significant port. Political tensions surfaced around fishermen's agitations. The opposition Congress sided with the fishing community's demands, pressuring the LDF for better rehabilitation. The left accused some protest leaders of political motives to embarrass the government. The Latin Catholic Church's involvement in protests added a sensitive socio-political dimension. The LDF, traditionally atheist and leftist, had to negotiate with church leaders, which was politically delicate. In late 2022, when protests turned violent, the BJP and Congress criticized the LDF's handling of law and order. The LDF implied external forces might be fomenting unrest to stall the project, a veiled reference to rival port interests or foreign influence. A compromise was eventually reached, but not without political sparring. By the 2025 inauguration, a quiet credit war brewed. The UDF claimed credit for conceiving and awarding the project, with former Chief Minister Chandy often credited for breaking the logjam in 2015. The LDF countered that they navigated the toughest construction phase amidst protests and pandemics under Vijayan. The central BJP government highlighted its role, with PM Modi's inauguration portrayed as a victory for India's maritime ambitions under his leadership. Central ministers noted Vizhinjam's alignment with Modi's Sagarmala program and Act East policy. In Kerala's local politics, both UDF and LDF celebrate Vizhinjam as a bipartisan success, each with their nuance, given its significance made opposition on party lines untenable. Controversies included Adani's involvement, with some activists and opposition figures linking it to crony capitalism. Questions arose over why Adani was the sole bidder, implying tender conditions or scale discouraged others. Investigations found no wrongdoing. Many global port operators were uninterested without heavy subsidies, leaving Adani to take the risk. The narrative of public cost, private profit, with Kerala investing heavily in infrastructure while Adani operates, irked the left, yet they chose not to renegotiate the contract after 2016, signaling acceptance of the model. A brief controversy over naming the port, whether after a political figure or simply Vizhinjam International Seaport, was settled with the non-partisan name. In conclusion, Vizhinjam exemplifies how large infrastructure in India can cut across party lines. All tiers of government and both major state parties had a hand in it. Despite controversies over environmental impacts and corporate involvement, remarkable political consensus on the port's strategic need helped it survive 3 decades of hurdles. Now operational, Leaders across the spectrum are eager to associate with its success, making Vizhinjam a prized political achievement for Kerala and a showcase for India. Let's examine the role of Adani Ports and the public-private partnership model. Vizhinjam is being developed under a PPP with Adani Ports and Special Economic Zone as the private concessionaire and the Government of Kerala through Vizhinjam International Seaport Ltd, VISL, as the public partner. This structure is central to the project's execution. The project follows a landlord-port model of PPP. The state government, with central assistance, funded a significant portion of the basic infrastructure, chiefly the giant breakwater, 3.1 kilometers in Phase 1 to extend to 4.5 kilometer dredging and land acquisition. Adani is responsible for constructing and operating the port superstructure, berths, cranes, yard equipment, and overall operations. This is a design, build, finance, operate, transfer contract where Adani builds and runs the port for the concession period and will eventually transfer it back to the government. The concession agreement signed in August 2015 runs for 40 years, extendable by 20 years. In Phase 1, the total project cost was about Rs 8,867 crore, roughly USD $1.1 billion. Kerala's government, with central viability gap funding, bore roughly two-thirds, mainly for the breakwater and supporting infrastructure. Adani invested the remaining one-third in port facilities, with their initial investment reported at over Rs 4,500 crore. The central government's viability gap grant, around R1,600 crore per news reports, made the project financially viable, as transshipment ports have high upfront costs and uncertain initial returns. In exchange, Adani Ports will share a portion of revenue with the government after a predefined period. From 2034, when all phases are expected to be operational, Adani Vizhinjam Port will start sharing revenue with the state, giving Adani about 15 years to recoup their investment. Adani Ports, India's largest port developer, brings technical expertise, operational experience, and commercial clout, including relationships with shipping lines. They have outfitted Vizhinjam with state-of-the-art equipment, including India's tallest quay cranes, superposed Panamax cranes with 72-meter outreach, and automated yard cranes, all imported and installed by Adani. Adani also handles port marketing, negotiating with global shipping lines. A key success was their tie-up with MSC Mediterranean Shipping Company to include Vizhinjam on the MSC Jade service connecting Asia-Europe. This ensures the port attracts business, not just infrastructure. Vizhinjam is India's first semi-automated port, featuring remote-controlled cranes and AI-powered vessel traffic management developed with IIT Madras. The public partner, VISL, oversaw land acquisition over 360 acres, including 130 acres reclaimed from the sea, community liaison, and marine works contracting. The PPP model requires tight coordination. The state builds the breakwater and common facilities, handing them to Adani, while Adani builds container terminals and operates the port. Despite delays and cost escalations, this partnership persisted, showing commitment from both sides. Adani faced challenges, regulatory delays, natural disasters, local unrest, and had a strained relationship with the state at times. They sought extensions via force majeure for the cyclone and pandemic, which the state accepted. In late 2022, Adani sued the Kerala government for not removing protest blockades, highlighting friction. However, cooperation remained intact, with both sides realigning timelines. Adani's persistence stems from Vizhinjam's strategic importance. APSEZ views it as an unmatched location and a jewel in their portfolio, cementing regional dominance. Notably, APSEZ is also developing a terminal in Colombo Port, hedging bets and integrating regional operations. The PPP model benefits Kerala with a world-class port and limited operational risk. The state gains from future revenue sharing and economic activity. The landlord model ensures port land and core assets remain government-owned, with Adani as a tenant operator. Over 5,000 direct and indirect jobs are expected, with Adani following local employment and CSR provisions. After the concession, the port reverts to the government, which can release or operate it. In summary, Adani is the driving private force behind Vizhinjam, enabled by significant public investment. This PPP approach, born from necessity after purely private attempts failed, sees the government shouldering initial risk and infrastructure, while Adani brings efficiency and capital for operations. Tensions aside, it's delivered India's first deep-water transshipment port. The model's success will depend on smooth operations and profit sharing. For now, both state and Adani are fully invested. Finally, let's compare Vizhinjam with other major transshipment ports, such as Colombo in Sri Lanka, Singapore, and Dubai's Jebel Ali, to see how it stacks up. Vizhinjam's location is a major advantage, sitting just 10 nautical miles from the Suez Canal to Malacca Strait route, closer than Colombo, which is slightly farther, and far closer than Singapore or Dubai. This minimal deviation makes it highly attractive for mainline vessels. Its 18 to 24 meter natural depth allows it to handle ultra-large container ships over 20,000 TEUs, matching Singapore and Dubai. Colombo's depth is slightly less, limiting some larger vessels, though it's still a major hub. As of 2025, Vizhinjam handles over 100,000 TEUs monthly in its ramp-up. Colombo handles millions of TEUs annually, Singapore over 30 million, and Jebel Ali around 15 million. Vizhinjam's Phase 1 capacity is smaller but scalable with future phases. Vizhinjam's semi-automated operations, with AI traffic management and super post-Panamax cranes, are modern but less advanced than Singapore's fully automated terminals. Colombo and Jebel Ali use semi-automation, similar to Vizhinjam. Geopolitically, Vizhinjam strengthens India's autonomy, reducing reliance on foreign hubs like Colombo, where Chinese investments are significant. Singapore and Dubai are neutral global hubs, less tied to regional geopolitics. Vizhinjam's lower logistics cost for Indian cargo, with 30 to 40% savings, make it competitive for domestic traffic. Colombo remains cost-effective for South Asia, while Singapore and Dubai cater to global routes with higher costs. Vizhinjam's youth compared to these established giants is offset by its strategic location and India's growing trade volumes. It's poised to capture a significant share of Indian and regional transshipment, potentially rivaling Colombo in the coming years. That's the complete story of the Vizhinjam International Seaport, a monumental project reshaping India's maritime future. From its rocky start in 1991 to its 2025 inauguration, it's faced cyclones, protests, and political hurdles, but emerged as a symbol of India's ambition. Economically, it's a lifeline for trade. Strategically, it's a geopolitical chess move. Environmentally, it's a delicate balance. The Adani-Kerala partnership, political consensus, and global comparisons all highlight its significance.